Okay, so what we're going to be doing here is going over a PBR workflow. Okay, so we're going to build a little widget here that we're going to put up and then build some PBR textures for it. Okay, now what we're going to be using is Sketchfab. Sketchfab is a company that allows you to post up PBR types of models, and they have a you can register for free, so you'll need to go over and register, and then you're allowed to upload a model with textures, and it's got a great viewer. And so we're going to be using Sketchfab, so you'll need to go over here and register an account with Sketchfab. Okay, we're going to build some simple devices here. We're going to go from the front view. Make sure that you've got Max set up correctly. So under your Customize, go to Unit Setup. Make sure under System Unit Setup you have this set for centimeters. Max by default uses inches. We don't want to use inches because the majority of the industry uses centimeters, so we want to be the same as other softwares. That way when this model is imported into other softwares, the scale will be the same. This area here does not change the scale of the world, but it's what we're measuring. I use US standard and I use feet with decimal inches. I don't want to use fractions. I want to use decimals. So this is what I use to measure my objects with. Okay. Okay, we're going to build in the front view, and we're just going to build a simple plane. It's a plane. We don't need all these subdivisions in here, so we're just going to go to our Modify panel. Right click on these little tumblers, we'll zero this out. We want to center it in the world, so you want to right click move, and then down here on the X, Y, and Z, right click on each one of these little tumblers down here to center it. Okay, then we want to make it a specific size. We don't want this too big. Let's do it, a foot is fine. So let's make it a foot. Z to zoom in on that, F3 so we can see it, and then F4 with a wireframe on it. Okay, we don't really need a wireframe. Okay, this has bounding boxes. To get rid of these little bounding boxes, you right click, I'm sorry, not right click, you go up here to this little menu that's up here at the top, right click on where it says standard and go to per view presets, and then on your per view presets unselect selection brackets until it's applied to all viewports, and then we won't see those selection brackets. Okay, we need to put a material on this, so go on the material editor. Now we're not going to be using an advanced renderer for this. Okay, we're going to be using Max's stand line rendering to bake. We're going to be doing some baking. So you want to go to rendering up here, go down to render setup, and change this from Arnold to scanline. Now, if you're in an older version of Max, scanline render is the default, but if you're in a newer version of Max, Arnold's the default. So change it to scanline, and that's the renderer we're going to be using. Okay, we're going to put a material on this. We want to use a standard legacy material, so pull this out and just assign this to your object for right now. And that's all we need to do for the material right now. So there we go. Okay, so this is a simple plane. Let's give it a name. We're going to call this our texture plane. And then we're going to export this. Let's save this first. So just save your project. Save it. Save as. And we'll just call this texture plane. And then to bring it into Sketchfab, you can kick it out as an OBJ or an FBX. So we just go export. Make sure you have it selected, and then do export selected. And then we'll just call this texture plane. Just leave the defaults. Okay, then we're going to go ahead and bring it into Sketchfab. So once you have registered, you just click on your little icon up here in the top right hand corner. This will take you into your account. I have many things in here. You can click upload, and then you can drag and drop it in here, or just click inside of there. And where am I at here? Oh, I need to get out of there. I need to be in here. And there's my texture plane, OBJ. And just open that. Continue. Then it'll go through a process, bringing it up. Okay, you can click View Your Model. And there it comes. There's our awesome plane. Okay, now we want to go ahead, and I'm going to go ahead and take you in and show you how to set up your plane for what we're going to be doing. So right up here where it says Edit 3D Settings, we want to click on this, and that'll take you into the Sketchfab controls. Okay, so there's lots of controls up here. They're pretty easy to use. First one is a General tab, then there's a Lighting tab, and then there's Material tab. Those are the main three that we'll be using. So on our scene, we want to go down here to Background, and they have some default environments that you can pick. So go to Image here, and then they have some default ones. And let's pick, let's do this one that's Dirty Light. This gives us a little texture back here, so we have a little background. So we're going to use that. Okay. All right. Now for our lighting, we're going to click on this, and then they have a bunch of HDR files down in here that you can load up. Okay. And we want something that's going to give us some nice reflections. So let's use this Glaze Patio. Okay, that's going to be what's our reflecting and lighting our scene. Then we're going to go over here to Materials. Now we're going to put bitmaps in these later, but for right now, we're just going to go into your base color here. It's white right now. Let's go in and click on here, and let's just change it to a mid gray. And on our metalness, it's all the way down. Let's click it all the way up for right now. We're going to go for a roughness setting, and we're going to turn it all the way down. And now you'll see that this is basically a polished piece of metal, and we can see it's reflecting our environment. Okay, now if you hold down the Alt key and the left mouse button and you drag, you could rotate that environment around, which is our light source. Okay. Now up here you have a save view, and this creates a thumbnail of what we want to be able to see when people come in here. So just click Save View, and it will save a little thumbnail of that. Okay, we want to click Save Settings. And basically now we have it set up to do our next stage. So that's the basics of setting up a little plane in Sketchfab. Okay, so let's come back in here. And what we're going to do is we're going to create some little widget floaters to put on here that we're going to create normals from. A floater is an object that we can create that we put over the top of something, and it'll seem like it's merged in as part of it. A real simple example of that is if I create a sphere and put my material on it. F4 for my wireframe. And let's go to the top view. Z, zoom in on it. And then let's say I come in here I convert it to an editable poly, and then I select this front set of polygons and delete those. Now let's go to the front. Now we're looking on the inside of this, and so it's inside out, so we have to select all the faces and then go in here under Edit Polygons and click Flip so it's facing us. Okay. Now when we put a floater on top of here, we want to have a little flat edge around it. So we're going to go to Scale, and I'm holding down the Shift key, and I click inside of here and scale out a little bit. Doesn't matter how far. And then what we want is to be able to create a little filleted edge around this, because it'll cast a nice highlight when we put our piece into our texturing. So just double click on this, go to chamfer, and then the distance up here will probably be too much, so just right click on the tumbler to zero it out. Well, I can't get it to... do it manually. Okay, so pull it down so that it's rounded something about like that. Maybe a little bit more like that. Okay, and then I can put a subdivision on this. I don't care if you use Mesh Smooth or Turbo Smooth. It doesn't make any difference. All right, we go to the top view. Then we need it to be in front of our plane. This is our construction plane right here, so we need it to be in front of it. It doesn't matter how far out in front that it is, it's just got to be out in front of us, so don't let it be clipping into this. Then we go to the front view, and we can pull it over on top of here. And then when I turn my wireframe off, you'll see looks like it's cut right into our plane, even though it's not. Now we can modify our shader here a little bit, and let's give it a little bit of a specular to it. And we're going to narrow down our glossiness. And see how that's given us a nice rounded highlight on this, because we did a fillet on that edge. I like to put a little bit of color in my specular, just a little. And that's called a floater. Okay, so I can hold down my Shift key, I can drag it, and you can see how these look like they're actually carved into the actual piece. Okay, so we're going to do a little bit more complicated floaters, but first we'll just show you this process. So let's just, oops. Let's grab my two spheres and drag them down. Okay, what we're going to be doing is creating a normal map so that we can place a normal map into Sketchfab, and it'll make it look like these were actually cut into our object. So we just click on our object. We're going to add a modifier to it. And what we're adding is what's called a projection modifier. This tells it we're going to be able to cast light rays from our point of view onto the object. Okay. We need to go over here and pick the objects we want it to cast. We can click Pick by List, and then the list will pop out. And then I got my 4 spheres in here. I can add these. So what it's saying is cast these onto this plane. So we're going to go under Rendering, and we're going to go Render to Texture. This will bring up, this is our section which will allow us to bake a normal map. So right up here, you can set a path to where you want your normal maps to go. Then whatever we pick, which right now we have the texture plane, it'll show up right here. We have some settings we need to do in here. We are doing a projection, so we need to turn on projection. Go to your options right here and make sure that you set this ray mischeck turned off. Okay. Make sure this is on tangent. This is a type of normal map that we're going to project from. And let's see. Okay, so that's all. We can set that. Now, be wary of this. Sometimes this defaults to automatic unwrap, which means it's going to re-unwrap our object. We normally don't want to do that. We want to keep this using the existing channel. Now, this is a plane which already has a mapping channel on it, so we don't have to worry about it. But if we were using other things, we would unwrap them first, and we don't want to overwrite that. Okay, now we need to add into this section right here whatever it is that we want to bake out. So we click add, and what we're going to bake is a normal map. So you select normal map, and that'll go inside there. Now, in the current version of Max, we've got an exposure happening, or not exposure, but a gamma happening in here. So you need to go to rendering and go down to here where it says gamma LUT setup and turn this off. When we're we want this on when we're rendering in here, but not when we're baking. We want it off. Watch this little where it says element background here, and this is supposed to be normal map purple, and it's kind of washed out. Watch the color of it change when I click OK. See how it's a deep, kind of a purple now? That's what it should be. So if you bake out without doing that, then you'll have some problems. Okay, we want to go 2048. That's the size maps that we will do for this project. And then all I have to do is hit render. And then if I go up here, I go File. By the way, I didn't go over this, but you should do this. I already changed mine. So right here where it says File Type, click here and change this to a PNG. Okay, change it to a PNG. And what we want is a 24-bit PNG. We do not want an alpha. 24, no alpha. Okay, then I can go up here, File, View Image File. And here is my plane. Now you'll notice there's nothing on it. Now the reason is because when you have this projection plane on here, if you go to cage, okay, we have to push it out so that think of it that it's projecting light from this onto there, and it was projecting it below our objects. So we need to bring it out in front. Now, it doesn't matter how far out in front it is because it's a straight projection, but it's got to be in front of those. Okay? So now, when I hit render again, you'll see it's capturing my objects. And so now when I go over here, there's my circles. Okay, let's go over and bring that into Sketchfab. So, back into Sketchfab, go down here where it says Normal Map, turn it on, click this little swatch here and say Import Textures. Then I'm going to import it, and it'll put them on there. Now, let's turn this so that it's not a metal. So we go back down. It's not a metal, so now it's like a piece of plastic. And I'm going to show you how to kind of, a nice way to look at this is you're going to go down here. Down here at the bottom, there's that little thing called a model inspector. So we're going to click on that. And then we're going to go down here and click on Map Cap Surface. And this will put a shader on it that's similar to the shader we have in Max. And now we can see that that looks like we have little divots inside of here. Okay, if we hold down the shift, we can move. We can't move the light around. If you go to final render, then we can move our shader around on it. See how those look like they're carved into it? That's the beauty of a normal map, is we can capture a distance Usually about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch is about as far as we can really hold. And we can cast a nice map off of that. Okay. All right, we can close the inspector. Now you have a roughness setting on here, and that's how shiny this is. And so we've got it like a mirror. So let's turn our roughness up a little bit. And now it's still shiny. Okay. But the light is bouncing off of it a little bit. It's diffusing off of it. So the roughness down, it's reflective all the way up. It's matte like concrete or something like that. All the way down, it's glossy, and somewhere in between. Okay, so we're going to be dealing with a roughness map, metalness map, and a base color, and a normal map. All right. So let's go back into Max. Let's come back to the front. Okay, we were just putting those on as tests. I want something a little bit more detailed a little bit. So what we're going to do is make some little widgets to put on here. So we're going to start off with a circle. And then we're going to convert the circle to a spline. Then we're going to select these vertices and we're going to break them. Now I can go to spline. I can pick this. Make sure you're in the front viewport. You're not in a perspective viewport. Notice I don't have a view cube up here. I turn that off because it confuses students. They have a tendency to think that when they hit front on the view cube, it's going to go to the front. Sometimes it might, but sometimes it's a front of an orthographic view, which means you're not truly in the front view. So I turn it off. Okay, let's move this down, say a distance about like this. We want to go up here and turn our snaps on. Now right click on your snaps and make sure it's on vertex and not grid points. Then over here I'm going to create line, and I'm going to create a line from here to there. Yes on welding it. A line from here to there. Yes on welding it. And this is the shape I want. Now I need to weld all these vertices, so I'm going to go to vertex, drag a box around so I get all the vertices. And then I was going to go over here and click weld, and most likely the default setting will be fine for us. All right, now I want to turn down the steps on this. Okay, so under interpolation, turn this down to 3. Maybe 2. No, 3. Okay. And that's how much it's dividing this up here. Okay, when it's on 6, you'll see it's really smooth, but we're going to subdivide this later, so I don't want it that smooth. Let's go to the 3. All right, at this point, this is ready to deal with, so we're going to right click and just convert it to an editable spline. Now, you want to save periodically, so before we do that, go save as, and hit this plus button down here. And then it will call it texture plane 01. So we're saving the stages. Now, Max has a new setting that you might want to turn on. I would tell you to turn it on. So under customize, under your preferences, if you go under files, you can click this button, increment save, and click OK. Now, if up here in the top end left-hand corner, you'll see where it says texture plane 01. Now, if I just hit save, okay, or Control S, you'll see now it says 2. So it won't override our old ones. It makes a new one every time, which is a very prudent thing to do. Okay, now we want to convert this to a poly. So we're going to go convert to an editable poly, and now it'll be a polygon. And then let's go back and put our shader on it. Okay, right now it's a flat plane. So what I want to do is we want to have our wireframe on. So be sure you have F4 turned on so that we can see our wireframe. So we're going to go to polygon and we select this polygon. And then under edit polygons down here, we're going to do an inset. Just click and drag and drag an inset, and we want something about like that. Okay, now we're going to switch around to our perspective view, and I'm going to pull it back. Something about like this. Be sure you don't have a snap-on when we're doing this. And I'm going to go for something about like that. Okay, now, like I said before, we want to have a little bitty lip out here, so we're going to go to border. We're going to click the border, and then we're going to go scale, and I'm going to hold down the shift key, and then I'm going to scale this out. Now you'll see that it's scaling faster out here than it is there, which is fine. Then just stop and drag this one. Now it doesn't have to be perfect all the way around, because this is all going to disappear on us when we cast up here. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now eventually we're going to subdivide this, so we need to cut this because this back is not in quads and we want it in quads. So if we open up our tab up here, okay, our ribbon, we can go cut, make sure we have our snap to vertex, and I want to cut it right down the center. I want to cut it across here, cut it across here. And then we want to cut from here to there on both ends. Okay, then right click to get out of your cut. Then we want to go to this edge, highlight just one, and just click backspace. And we're doing that, so this is a quad, that's a quad, that's a quad. So here, backspace. So now this is all made up of quads. Now I want some more control of this because it'll want to bow in here when I start to subdivide this. So if I pick this edge and I tell it to ring, it'll pick all these across here. Okay, then we can go into, under Edit Edges, we can click Connect, and we're going to click this little Settings button, and then we can tell it how many that we want to connect. And we're trying to get all these so these quads are approximately the same size. So 7, 6, either one of those will work. I'm going to go with 6. Okay. Now these are all subdivided really well. So now let's double click on this edge. Hold down the Control click key and double click on this edge. Double click on this edge. Make sure you're in your selection mode up here and not in move or something, or you can accidentally move your object. Holding the Control key, double click here and there. Double click here and there. Now we have all these picked. Now we can go to our chamfer. And we'll need to bring this down. Something approximately like that. Set that in. And then we can add a subdivision on that. Matter of fact, we just use the subdivision that's built into it. So if you go down here under Subdivision Surface, just click Use NURMS, and it'll subdivide that. I'm going to turn off Show Cage. I want to see the orange. And let's set it to 3 iterations. Okay, we'll want to go to the top and do the same thing that we did before. G turns your grid on and off. Okay, so I just need to make sure, turn my snap off. By the way, S on your keyboard turns your snap on and off. So use S quite a bit, and G turns your grid on and off. Okay, we just want to pull this forward. Now, sometimes this might appear black to you if you've got the normals flipped, and so you might have to flip the normals. So I'm just going to move these off right now. And I can slide this on. Turn off my wire, F4, and now look, we've got a nice cool little widget in there. Okay, we're going to make a copy of this, so hold on to Shift and pull it over to the right. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put a symmetry modifier on this. Before we do that, though, we need to center this pivot point. So go to your hierarchy, Effect Pivot, Center to Object, and it'll put it right in the center. Okay, so now go over onto your Modify tab, and by the way, I didn't notice this, but when I made a copy, okay, I'll go back with this. Hold down my Shift to make another copy. This says instance, which means whatever I do to this one, it's going to change it. So I don't really want it an instance, so I would say a copy. So watch that when I click on this, see where it says editable poly and it's not bold, but when I click on this one, it's bold. That tells me this is an instance. So whatever I do this was going to do that one too. Now, I can turn this into where it's not an instance. If I right click on it, okay, and I go make unique, now it's no longer bound to that one. Okay, so it's ready for us to put a symmetry modifier on it. I want to turn my angle snaps on up here because I'm going to rotate it. Open up the symmetry and click mirror, and then I want to rotate this, and I want to rotate it 45 degrees. Okay, now if you notice right down here, as I rotate, you can see the degrees, and so I want to rotate it till it's 45. It doesn't matter if it's a negative 45 or a positive 45. It doesn't make any difference. And let's turn off our subdivision. We don't want to subdivide it yet. So let's turn that back off. All right. So now I'm going to right click and copy this, and then I'm going to paste it back on. I'm going to go to it, and then I'm going to rotate it still with my snaps on, and I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees. And then I've got a nice little cross pattern made. Now that I have that, now I want to subdivide it. So let's go ahead and put a mesh smooth on it. And we want 3 iterations. Okay, I want to scale this down small. And I want to scale these down a little bit too. Okay, let's go for something like this. Hold down my Shift key. As a matter of fact, I want these equally spaced, so I'm going to delete this one. And when I make this one, hold down my Shift and pull it. I'm going to gap it about like that. And let's say 3. And then I'm going to pick all of those. And then kind of center those. Now, our naming conventions, see how this is circles here? This is what I call it sucks. You want to name your objects. Easy way to name these. If you go to Tools, come down here to Rename Objects. Okay, I'm going to call these Tall Slits. And I'm going to say Number. And then when I hit rename, it's going to name those. Okay. Now I'm going to be on layers here, and then I'm going to right click, create a layer, and it'll put those all together. And guess what? I'll name this layer Tall Slits. And then it allows me to have those manipulated as a group, so to speak. All right, let's get this. And I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. Maybe I like that. And down here, hold down my Shift. 3 of those. And let's pick all of those, kind of center it. We can rename those. I'm going to call this cross slits. You can name anything you want, doesn't make any difference. Okay, and then let's make a layer for those. Create a layer. Now, one of the things that Max does that I don't particularly like is every time I make a layer, it makes it the active layer. See this little green button? That means the next time I make something, it's going to put it in that layer. So you got to make sure you always go back and click on default. That way it's putting it into the default layer. Okay, if we turn off our wireframe now. Okay, I think that's what I'm going to use. Now yours doesn't have to look just like mine. You can be creative, okay? And I'm going to go for that. So I'm going to bake that. So we pick this. Now, I don't need these spheres in here. It wouldn't hurt if they're in here, but I don't need those in here anymore. So I can delete those out, pick from list. And I'm going to pick all of my slits, but not those spheres. So they're all in there. So now all I got to do is bake again. So render to texture. My setting is all set up. Okay, I'm not changing anything. So just hit render. Now you'll get a little error message in here which says, "Are you sure you want to overwrite?" I click yes, but there's a little button in the bottom left-hand corner that says, "Don't ever ask me this again." So just click yes. When it asks you all that stuff, just click yes. So now if I go to my view, my image file, now, can you see how pale this is? That's because if you're in Max 2021, it wants to keep turning back on the gamma LUT. I could kill them for doing this, but I turn it off and then it'll turn it back on. Okay. So I have to bake again. View image file. Now you'll see it's a nice intense purple. Okay. So let's go re-import that. So just click right here, manage your textures, import a textures, and import it. Now it'll keep the other ones in here too that you can revert back to them if you want to. And there we go. So that's how you bake textures. Now, they fixed this in Max 2021. I'm not sure if 2020 is fixed, so according to which Max you have. Max had a tendency to invert the normals. You'll notice over here on the little controls over here, there's a flip green channel. Now, see how these look like they're coming out now? That's the way Max used to bake them. So when you'd bring them in, you'd have outies instead of innies. And so they had this little flip green that allow you to flip it. Okay. As a matter of fact. So anyway, different engines bake differently is what that is. So they've got a little switch in here according to what you're baking in Blender or Lightwave or whatever. You can flip which way that is. Ours are innies. So there we go. So that's kind of how you deal with getting normal maps created. Now we're going to do some more creating of normal maps because this is how we bake geometry normal into our normals. Okay. But we can bake textures into it too, and we're going to explore that in the next video. All right, so at this point, you've got your model set up. It's easy for us to come back and alter this, add more things, bake another normal map, and then bring it back in. Okay, thank you for starting this for me. And then the next video, we're going to start doing with our textures.